Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and I have an awesome new project for you guys using our sensational Snowflakes embroidery collection. So this is machine embroidery, and we are going to stitch out these designs super quick and easy to create these beautiful snowflake wreaths. So for this project, you will need a 20-inch square of fabric. I'm using blue, and I'm going to stitch out my snowflakes on this fabric in white. Now notice you can stitch the snowflakes in two colors. I've got one that's only one single color, but all the rest of them, it's a 6 snowflake collection, can be stitched in two colors if desired. So you can think about that a little bit. You might not be able to tell, but this one I stitched in white and a very, very light blue. So a 20-inch piece of fabric, a 14-inch embroidery hoop to hang this on the wall, and then I've created a little placement guide for you guys. So whenever I created mine, I used lots of rulers and some tools that I had around the house that you probably won't have. So I realized a really easier way to do this would be to have a placement guide. So come to leahday.com/snowflake. You can download this little template, and basically it's going to give you marks for where to mark your fabric for where the center of the snowflakes can go. And if you want to, you can put a snowflake in the center too. So now that you have your placement guide and your fabric, let's get started. The first step is to open up your template and cut along those lines so that way you can use it to mark your fabric. And do double check that that 1-inch box measures 1 inch. That's way you're sure that this is an accurate template. So I placed this on my fabric, centering it up, and I marked those plus signs. And these not only show us where the center of each snowflake should go, it also gives us an idea of the direction. So the plus sign is also indicating the direction, the angle of that snowflake as well. So there we go, fabric marked, ready to go. And I did starch and press my fabric before getting started just to make sure I got all the wrinkles out. All right, now it's time to hoop, and I want to first teach you how to hoop for small embroidery hoops. So this is going to be your smallest hoop. You can do a 4-inch and it's going to work just fine, but you're going to have to hoop it every single time for every single snowflake. That can get a little slow, a little tedious, but just stay patient with it. It's going to work out great. First step that I've done is I have hooped some Polymesh. So this is OESD Polymesh. It is a cutaway stabilizer. You can see it's not super thick, and it's not enough stabilization for these snowflakes all by itself. So I also float a piece of tearaway, and this is Baby Lock Tearaway Firm. You know, it's whatever tearaway stabilizer you've got on hand, that's going to work just fine. So whenever I am at my machine, I just float that right underneath. I just slide that right underneath the hoop. And so that's the layers of stabilizer that I'm using for every snowflake. So I'm going to use this little grid that came with my hoop. I'm not sure if this comes with every single embroidery machine, but this is very important for this method. So check with your dealer and see if you can get something like this. I am going to be using a Janome 15,000, and this came with my machine and my hoops. So now I'm going to layer on my fabric, and you're going to do this, again, a hooping for small hoops, you're going to do this for every single snowflake. So first off, let's do one at an angle, and I'm going to line this up so that the plus sign is running straight with the hoop. And I'm going to aim to get that plus sign roughly in the center. But how do I check? I use this little grid. So it has these little placement nubbins here, and I can kind of feel even through the fabric, and that feels good. So if you have a very small hoop, you're going to want to make sure that that plus sign is right in the center. So just shift the fabric and keep lining it up, making sure until that plus sign is right in the center and it's all layered on the hoop. So from here, this is exactly where it needs to be. I take this, not shifting anything, take it to the machine, first do a line of basting stitches all around, and then stitch my snowflake. Once I was done stitching it, I'll take it out of the hoop, cut away all of the extra stabilizer, re-hoop, arrange my fabric again, centering that up, stitch my next snowflake. So you'll need to rehoop for every single snowflake if you have a small hoop like this. And now I want to teach you how to use a big hoop and manage to do this in only 2 hoopings. This is really, really exciting because it really saves so much time on doing this placement and stitching out the designs. So here I'm just going to line up so that I generally have plus signs lined up, and I want 1, 2, 3. I might be able to stitch that center one too. We're just going to have to wait and see. So I place my little grid on top, making sure that it's lined up nicely. And for this situation, I'm not actually going to try and get the plus signs lined up anywhere in particular, because on my machine I can actually use this grid. It lines up with the machine itself. I can actually move the snowflake over and follow that grid pattern and get the snowflakes in position in the software of the machine versus having to get the fabric perfect here in the hoop. And that really saves some time. So in this particular situation, I'm going to be using the grid as a reference for where all of these plus signs are. So again, same stabilizer, Polymesh cutaway, and then I'm going to float a full piece of tearaway underneath, so that way I have enough stabilizer for these designs. So let's move to the machine. I'll show you how it stitches. So here on my machine, I have already placed the hoop. I've also floated my stabilizer underneath. So everything to do with the hoop and the fabric is already set. So now I take a look at that grid, making sure that that placement template is lined up and locked into place. So then I looked for those plus signs that I marked on the fabric. So I've got one right here. Then I brought the machines in, making sure that I had the right hoop selected, my GR hoop. And then I brought the designs in one by one and placed them counting the lines. And I actually had to count these little lines on that grid in order to make sure that I had everything lined up just exactly right. And what's nice is having that center one place. This is new. I haven't played with having a center design stitched. That actually allowed me to get even better, nicer, tighter placement for these other outer snowflakes. So for this particular one, I'm going to stitch everything in white, and I'm going to stitch a repeating pattern of this one in the center. That's going to be my different design, and then I'm going to use snowflake number 1, and I believe that's snowflake number 3. So alternating these, I think this is going to really stitch out nicely. So once everything is set, I'm sure that I've got the right layers of stabilizer. I'm going to click OK on my design, and then it tells me what hoop to make sure that I'm using the right hoop, and then I stitch my basting stitch all the way around. So just grab a hold of that thread, and this is what keeps all those layers of stabilizer together, ensures that nothing's going to slip, and it just is a good way to start any project. I always begin with a line of basting stitches. Once it's stitched and basted, I really don't have to worry about the fabric as much because I know it's locked in position. So I can hit X to get out of here. And you might be wondering about the angles. Because we are stitching hexagon shape, there's 6-sided snowflakes, and we're stitching them into a hexagon shaped pattern. You don't have to worry about rotation unless you want to. If you wanted to, you could rotate the design around so that the tips of the snowflake don't come so close together. That's entirely up to you. If you want to, I'll show you how I would do that. I would simply tap on the design I want to rotate, hit the rotate button, and then I'd rotate that down 30 degrees. 30 degrees would have it set in a different angle, and unfortunately the fastest way to do this is one little click at a time, just like so. So there we go. In this case, you see we have a little bit more of a gap between those designs. It's up to you what looks best to you. It's entirely up to you. I actually like it so that those points are coming really close together, so that's how I'm going to stitch it this time. Fun thing is, the stitches out so fast. You can stitch multiple ones. They're great gifts, and it's going to go really, really quick. Now make sure you have lots of bobbins filled because this takes a lot of thread. So all I have to do now is just hit start, and it's going to get going. And all I'll need to do is, as the colors change, if I want to, I can change the colors, or I can just come back in here and hit start and leave the same color throughout. So this is what my snowflakes look like after they were stitched out in my big GR hoop. I'm going to take that all apart and go on ahead and rehoop my GR hoop with more of my cutaway stabilizer. It looks like I cut this just a little bit short. Probably gonna have to cut another piece. Yeah, you don't want to be skimpy with this, guys, because if you're skimpy with it, you're gonna run into problems. It's gonna end up popping out of the hoop. So no big deal there. Now, let me show you how to handle this. I did that line of basting stitches, so I'm gonna need to pick that out and tear away this tearaway stabilizer. So the tearaway, I don't get too persnickety with it. I don't tear too close to the snowflakes. I'm not going to weed it out, you know. I'm just going to get right up to the stitching and just pull that away. And then I'm going to take and cut away the extra cutaway stabilizer too, just getting generally around the snowflakes as well. So you don't have to be too perfect with it, but you do want to cut away the excess. Hoop again, same thing, cutaway stabilizer in your hoop. And then we will float the top again and stitch out the other half of the snowflakes just exactly the same way. So everything is reset, and over here I have my designs. And you'll notice that I placed the center design again, even though I don't need it. And whenever I brought these in, I brought in these snowflakes first and this one last. So I don't have to stitch this out. You know, as the designs go through and they're stitching out one by one, I don't have to stitch this one out, but it's great for placement because you can see how those ends of the snowflakes line up, and that perfectly allowed me to line up each of these around it and get consistent spacing all around too. It's not an exact science here, but I really feel like having that center snowflake's really nice. Even if you don't end up stitching it, it's really easy. It makes for the placement just a little bit easier. All right, I'm gonna hit OK. I've got all of these ready to go. Now they're just gonna stitch out and we'll be done. So here is my design all stitched out. And no, it's not 100% perfect. My alignment on this side was just a little bit close and a little bit off, but from a distance you really can't see it. And I love how this comes together. I really like the center snowflake and just using 3 designs total. I think that there's lots of different ways you can stitch this out, and the wonderful thing was it's stitched out in a day. So what did I do to get it to this stage? I did take that basting stitch out, carefully picked that out, and then I trimmed up, I pulled away the tearaway stabilizer, and then I carefully trimmed up the cutaway stabilizer, being very careful not to cut my stitching or cut the fabric. And yes, this is the wrong side. I'm perfectly fine with that. If you don't want this look on the back of your little hoop quilt, then of course put another layer of fabric behind it, just right side up, and that will take care of that. You could also layer this with batting and backing fabric and quilt it. So if you wanted to do an extra layer of quilting around it, you could. That's always open to you. Now, visually, I think that the nicest thing is to look at which embroideries lined up nice and straight. And I think this set really lined up the straightest, because visually when you're looking at something, your eye will catch if it's not straight vertical. You're not really going to catch those 60-degree angles quite so much. So that's going to be my top, my bottom. And then I'm going to take my hoop quilt, and this is a 14-inch hoop. You could go with a bigger hoop if you wanted to. You'll just need to cut a bigger piece of fabric, obviously. And I'm just layering this in here and aiming to center it up, so that way I have the same amount of fabric around those snowflakes. Of course, you could get a little funny and do something like that, but that's not really my goal here. I really want this to be nicely centered, and that looks good right there. Okay, so now I'm going to take a fabric marking pencil. This is my Fons and Porter ceramic marking pencil, and I'm just going to do a few marks out here just to kind of be guidelines, so that way I know where to line this up. This is the tricky part, you know, and it can be hard to see it actually. And then once you trim the fabric away from the back, it is permanent. It's in there. You can't take it out. So really kind of have to get it right the first time. All right, so this piece goes on the bottom, just like so. And now I am lining up those marks I just made, just kind of feeling the frame and trying to get that generally lined back up the same way. And then now I take my hoop, the outside section of it, and I just layer that on top. And you do have some adjustment even after you press it in, so just know that you can press this in and then play a little bit. Might want to loosen that up just a little bit more. Wonderful thing about hoop quilts, hoop embroideries like this is you don't have to finish the back, you don't have to finish the sides. If I wanted to, I could definitely dress this up a lot more. I could put bias binding on the edge, I could paint the hoop. You know, there's lots of ways you can dress it up, but this is just such an easy, quick way of popping this in and having something finished, not having to finish the edges and do extra stitching and all that stuff. So I'm trying to make sure that this split in the frame lines up in the center, so I had to reset that. Okay, now let's take a look at all the edges, and I'm just looking at the tip of the snowflake to the edge of the frame, making sure that's lined up nicely. So that looks good, and I'm going to pull that fabric nice and tight now. So just take your time with this. Getting it nicely hooped is a little bit of a process, but take 5 minutes for this and you're going to have a lovely hoop quilt to hang on your wall every winter. Once you get it right, just tighten this up, then flip it over, and then take a sharp pair of scissors. I love these Karen K. Buckley Perfect scissors, and you're just going to trim up this fabric really close to the hoop. So like that. I usually angle the scissors just like that and trim that away nice and tight. So once you get it all done, it's ready to hang on the wall. Just put a tie up here at the top, ready to hang. Come find the sensational Snowflakes embroidery collection and your wreath placement guide at leahday.com/snowflake. Until next time, let's go stitch.